There's no better feeling as a UFC fan than seeing a title fight end with an electrifying knockout. And when the knockout comes earlier than expected, it's even more special. So, in today's video, we'll be taking a look at the top 5 fastest knockouts for UFC title fights. Believe us when we say you're gonna be shocked by how fast and devastating these knockouts were. So, without wasting any more time, let's begin. Number 5, Tito Ortiz vs. Evan Tanner at UFC 30. Back in 2001, the UFC was going through a major transition period as it moved from the SAG era to the more well-known Zuffa ownership. And during this time, there was no question about who the promotion's biggest star was: light heavyweight champion Tito Ortiz. A larger-than-life personality, Ortiz was known for his cocky, trash-talking antics and a wrestling-heavy style that, while not always the most thrilling, had propelled him to fame and notoriety. So when the UFC's first show under new ownership was put together, it was no surprise that Ortiz was given the main event slot against challenger Evan Tanner. After winning the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship less than a year prior, Ortiz was looking for a step up in competition. He would get it in the form of Evan Tanner, who had won 16 of his previous 17 fights and was a member of what was, at the time, arguably the best gym in the sport. We're talking about Ken Shamrock's renowned Lion's Den. The hope was that Ortiz could continue his run as the promotion's poster boy and deliver a spectacular performance for the new owners. And boy did he deliver. Just seconds into the fight, Ortiz and Tanner met in the center of the octagon, exchanging kicks and punches. But it was Ortiz who seized control, quickly securing a body lock on Tanner and slamming him to the ground with authority. The impact was brutal, with Tanner's head hitting the mat with a sickening thud. Ortiz didn't even need to follow up with punches. Tanner was out cold in just 30 seconds flat. For Ortiz, it was the ultimate highlight reel moment. A statement victory that showcased his raw power and sent a clear message to the rest of the UFC's light heavyweight division. And for fans, it was an unforgettable moment that marked the arrival of one of the most dominant fighters of his generation. Number 4, Frank Shamrock vs. Igor Zinoviv at UFC 16. Frank Shamrock, one of the most dominant champions in UFC history, might not be in the good graces of the UFC's brass today, but that doesn't take away from his impressive legacy in the octagon. And in his first middleweight title defense, he delivered one of the most brutal finishes in UFC history that's still talked about today. There was no feeling out process when Shamrock faced off against Igor Zinoviv. The Russian charged forward and landed a couple of leg kicks before clinching with the champion. But Shamrock had a trick up his sleeve. He hoisted Zinoviv into the air and slammed him to the mat with bone-crushing force. The impact of the slam broke Zinoviv's collarbone and knocked him out cold. The fight lasted a mere 22 seconds, but it was a jaw-dropping display of raw power and brutality that has stood the test of time. Unfortunately, it was also Zinoviv's last fight, as he was never able to recover from the devastating knockout. It's a shame that this unforgettable finish isn't showcased in UFC's highlight reels more often. Number 3, Ronda Rousey vs. Alexis Davis at UFC 175. When it comes to dominating opponents, few fighters can match the sheer ferocity and intensity of Ronda Rousey. And when she was booked to take on Alexis Davis at UFC 175, some critics thought it was nothing more than a foregone conclusion. But little did they know, they were about to witness one of the most stunning knockouts in UFC history. As soon as the fight began, Rousey came out like a woman possessed, immediately landing a stiff right hand that sent Davis reeling. Before the challenger could even catch her breath, Rousey executed a picture-perfect hip throw that sent Davis crashing to the canvas. And if that wasn't enough, Rousey then locked in a headlock and unleashed a rapid-fire series of punches that left Davis unconscious and unable to continue. The fight was over in a scant 16 seconds. But what was truly remarkable was the sheer number of significant strikes that Rousey was able to land in that time. In just over a second per strike, Rousey unleashed a relentless barrage of punches that left Davis with no chance to mount any kind of defense. Following her spectacular win over Alexis Davis, Ronda Rousey continued to dominate the women's bantamweight division, defending her title 6 times before losing it to Holly Holm in UFC 193. Despite that setback, Rousey's legacy as one of the most dominant fighters in UFC history is secure. Number 2. Andrei Arlovski vs. Paul Buentello at UFC 55. UFC fans have seen some incredible finishes over the years, but one knockout stands out as particularly shocking and confusing. When Andrei Arlovski defended his UFC heavyweight title against Paul Buentello, fans were expecting an all-out war. What they got instead was a lightning-fast finish that left everyone scratching their heads. Just 15 seconds into the fight, Buentello surprised everybody by diving for a takedown. Referee Big John McCarthy, apparently thinking that Buentello had been knocked out, immediately stepped in to stop the fight. The crowd erupted in boos, confused as to what had just happened. But as slow-motion replays later showed, Arlovski had slipped a Buentello jab and countered with a clean right hand that instantly knocked Buentello out. The force of the punch sent Buentello falling forward, giving the illusion of a takedown attempt. When Buentello got back to his feet, he was bleeding from under his left eye and looked dazed and confused. Arlovski's knockout punch remains one of the most perfectly timed counters in UFC history, and his finish of Buentello remains the fastest in any UFC heavyweight title fight. What's even more impressive is that this was the second time in 2005 that Arlovski had finished a title fight in under a minute. 8 months earlier, he claimed the gold by beating Tim Sylvia in just 47 seconds. While fans may have been confused and even angered by the quick stoppage of the Arlovski vs. Buentello fight, there's no denying the incredible skill and precision that Arlovski demonstrated with his lightning-fast knockout punch. It's a moment that will go down in UFC history as one of the most memorable and impressive finishes of all time. Number 1. Conor McGregor vs. Jose Aldo at UFC 194. In the world of mixed martial arts, few moments are more exhilarating than a championship fight. And when that championship fight involves two of the sport's biggest stars going head-to-head, the excitement reaches fever pitch. That's exactly what happened on December 12, 2015, when UFC featherweight champ Jose Aldo stepped into the octagon to take on Irish sensation Conor McGregor in what was arguably the most hyped title fight in UFC history. For months, fans had debated who would emerge victorious in this epic clash of styles. Would it be the slick, charismatic striker from Ireland, or the relentless Brazilian champion with a seemingly indestructible chin? As the two warriors stared each other down in the moments before the opening bell, the anticipation was palpable. But nobody could have predicted just how quickly the fight would end. As soon as the referee signaled the start of the bout, McGregor burst forward with a flurry of feints and strikes, clearly eager to assert his dominance over his opponent. Aldo, seemingly rattled by McGregor's aggressive approach, took the bait and lunged forward with a wild right hand. It was the opening McGregor had been waiting for. In a split second, he countered with a lightning-fast left that landed flush on Aldo's chin. The Brazilian crumpled to the mat in a heap, and McGregor pounced with a few quick follow-up shots before the referee could step in and call a halt to the contest. In just 13 seconds, McGregor had accomplished what many thought was impossible. He had defeated one of the greatest fighters of all time to become the UFC featherweight champion. The crowd erupted in disbelief, and McGregor celebrated his trademark style, strutting around the octagon with his arms raised in victory. For fans of the sport, the McGregor-Aldo fight will always be remembered as one of the most thrilling, high-stakes battles in UFC history. It was a moment that showcased the incredible skill, athleticism, and sheer excitement that make MMA such a captivating and thrilling spectacle. Make sure you check out either video shown on your screen right now. They're just as awesome. So click on one, and we'll see you there.